Hello to all the comic fans, Marvel geeks, and all the nerds in between. Welcome to another episode of the New and Improved Vigilante Vibes, where I give you all the Marvel discussions, theories, and news without the toxicity that's become such a big part of the fandom. I'm your host, Megan Nicole, and today I have a very special guest. He's a huge comic fan, and his channel proves just that. You can find him on YouTube at Read the Freaking Comics, and I have to say, I am a huge fan of his deep dives into the comic world. So, I think you guys will too. Please welcome Michael Regina.
Hello, hello. How are you?
So good. So excited you're here.
Oh, thank you.
Why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So I'm from Montreal, Canada, born and raised, and have been a comic nerd since as early as I can recall. My earliest memories are having my dad take me to the local pharmacy where they had a spinner rack, and I was able to pick out my first Iron Man comic when I was a kid. And yeah, begging him to go back again and again every time he needed to go. So I thought that was just a fun way to get my collection going. And yeah, just really love doing deep dives. Love getting into the minutia of the details of a comic. Get into that era, whatever era I'm looking at, whatever year those comics were published, what the writers were up to, what the publisher was up to, what the industry was into at that time. So that's essentially what those deep dives are all about.
Oh wow. So you're a lifelong comic fan.
Yeah, absolutely. I think my first comic, I had the flu, and my mom gave me a Richie Rich comic. So that was my first actual comic I had. But then I discovered superheroes, and I have the actual first comic I own is a Spider-Man. I think it's an amazing Spider-Man, and I have it framed somewhere here in my cave down here. And yeah, I've been a lifelong fan for sure. And when there was that resurgence of comic book films that started in the early 2000s, and just kind of the MCU burst onto the scene, I was absolutely elated and got my wife into comic books, or at least comic book movies, and yeah, she's a huge fan as well. So yeah, it's been a family affair.
Oh, I didn't know your wife was into it too. That's so cool.
Yeah, well, at least as far as movies are concerned. So she loves the movies. She loves the shows. Loki being her absolute favorite. So we share offices in the house, and her office is filled with Loki pops and TVA stuff and all kinds of stuff from the television shows. So yeah, she's deep into it. She hasn't read a comic yet. But she leaves that for me. But no, she's definitely it's definitely a love affair for her.
She might really like the new TVA comic book that's coming out tomorrow.
Yeah, I'd have to show her. I'd have to get her interested and see if she like would be interested in like testing the waters as far
Yeah.
as reading the comics. She's read some of the paperback books that have come out, but has yet to dive into the world of comics.
Well, I reviewed it for tomorrow, so I can't say too much on it because spoilers. Marvel's crazy about that, but it's like all mostly Loki characters or characters she will know if she's seen
Oh,
the
okay.
movies or the shows. So it's really fun. I think that would be a really cool place to start.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so it's going to be on my pull list. I'll get that. I'll get that over to her and see. Maybe I'll put it in her stocking. I'm not going to bend it or anything, but I'll put it in her stocking.
Oh, I'd love that. I'd love an update if she does read it.
Absolutely, absolutely. I'll share with you.
Oh, perfect. So, getting right into knowing a little bit more about you as a major comic fan, do you have a favorite comic book or a graphic novel that really resonated with you?
I'd have to say Mike Mignola's Hellboy. I love Mike Mignola's work, period, but his Hellboy stuff really resonated with me. I don't know why. I absolutely love that character. But I feel like that type of genre, that type of lore, that sort of, I mean, Halloween being my favorite holiday, that type of creepy vibe, that sort of Edgar Allan Poe kind of vibe of the stories in the Hellboy universe are just really what tickles my fancy. Even though I love tights and fights, there's enough fighting in Hellboy, but I just love some of the themes and some of the stuff that they've covered in Hellboy, and so I definitely would mark that up as one of my favorites.
Oh, I actually haven't read much of the Hellboy comics. That makes me really want to jump in.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they cover stuff that is, based on actual lore. Not lore, but fantasy stories like Baba Yaga and golems and all these various different folk tales that have been out there for centuries, and they treat it, of course, as 100% real. So when he's out there fighting Baba Yaga or an actual golem, it's 100% real. So it's a lot of fun.
That does sound really cool. I'm going to have to check that out.
Yeah.
So, would you say Hellboy is your all-time favorite comic book character?
I have so I'm looking straight up at my pops right now, and I have two Supermen, Doctor Fate. I have Batman Beyond up there. I will say I love the top tier, right? Definitely being the Batmans, Supermans, Spider-Mans. Those kind of top tier also work for me. But I also love quirky characters like Doctor Fate. Like I said, Doctor Fate is just an absolute love that character. I love his look. I love the myth behind that story. Same thing with characters like Moon Knight. Those kind of characters really tickle me when they sort of base something based on either ancient history or mythology, that kind of thing. I really gravitate towards that. But I have to say probably Superman, and I know I'm being sort of generic and basic, but I think Superman really speaks to me as well, and I can't help but get misty-eyed when I see a Superman story. A lot of it is about fathers and sons and legacies and stuff like that, and that sort of really gets to me in a good way, and really, it's really stories that I love, absolutely.
Don't worry about getting too generic. My favorite is Spider-Man, so I feel you.
I could tell.
Yeah. So your excitement about Superman, how do you feel about the upcoming Superman movie from James Gunn?
So I'm definitely excited. So James is definitely a very, very talented director, visual-wise, story-wise. I think he can set a mood. I think he can build a universe. I think, some of those behind the scenes images probably didn't serve the best purposes, meaning they looked a little odd, some of the costume choices. But we don't know the context, right? We'll know Thursday morning, rather, when we see that trailer, what that finished look is going to be. But everything I've seen so far that is not behind the scenes work has been sort of elegant and beautiful. That motion poster that was released yesterday was really, really nice. It was a nice touch. So yes, I can't wait to see it because I believe in James Gunn. I believe in his world building abilities. I've been watching Creature Commandos. I don't know if you've been watching it. I don't want to spoil it for you. The last one broke my heart, absolutely. And so I sort of love that world that he's sort of building in. So I think it's going to be pretty epic, and I'm excited to see it. I'm excited to see the trailer on Thursday.
Yeah, I am trying to dive in really hard into DC because, like you, I do completely trust James Gunn with this. If there's one thing about him, it's that he's going to make you fall in love with the character, and he's going to rip that character away from you. G.I. Robot destroyed me inside and out.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what I was talking about. My heart was broken. So yeah, exactly. And a character like G.I. Robot that I didn't have much experience with. I mean, I understood who he was and that kind of thing. And then in one episode, he pulled it's like that first 5 minutes of the movie Up. He created a storyline, and then it's like, oh, you're engaged, and you're like, oh, look at him go. He's having a blast finally, and then he's gone, and you're just like gutted. And so I went to every social media account I had, because I know James Gunn is so proficient in all over. And I just posted, "You broke my heart. I'm now going to mention this on Twitter. You broke my heart. I'm going to go."
I
Yeah.
saw that.
So I'm like, yeah. So yeah. So I mean, if he's able to do that with a character, as sort of esoteric as GI Robot, what can he do on building out something as big as Superman and sort of driving that story home? And I'm really interested to see some of the other characters he's brought on. Mr. Terrific looks really, really interesting. The Green Lantern, the Guy Gardner Green Lantern, that's the one where I'm looking at behind the scenes photos and I'm like, I'm not sure what's happening here. What look he's going for? But hopefully we'll be able to see some of it on Thursday when the trailer comes out.
He did give some information today, actually. He said that it's not going to be an origin story of Superman. We're diving right in. He is established. Lois Lane knows him and does not like him. And I am so here for skipping the origin and jumping right into the action.
Oh yeah, I think, for these biggies, for the Mount Rushmore of superheroes, I don't think we necessarily need an origin story anymore. I mean, you look at what they did with Sony's animated Into the Spider-Verse, and they just went right into it, and it's just the lore gets really deep into the Spider-Verse, but we just inherently know these characters, and I think Superman, it's pretty much well known. If you don't like comics or know comics, you know who Superman is, and he's from another planet, and that planet blew up or whatever, and he's here. I think that's pretty standard stuff that most people will know about.
It's even if you don't read comics or watch the movies, Peter Parker got bit by a spider. Exactly. We're good. It's fine. Yeah. We know what happens.
Exactly. I think and just get into it, right? Like let's have some fun, and no need to have that preamble.
Yeah, I don't want to see coming into their own story. I don't want to see David Cornsweet go in not being Superman and coming out, oh, maybe he is worthy. I want to see him established. I want to see him confident in his role as Superman. And so far, James Gunn is delivering everything I'm asking. So I'm pretty sure he's just listening somewhere.
Yeah, he's watching every podcast, listening to everything.
As he should.
So that would be awesome.
I think so. So my next question, was there a specific moment in a comic that changed your perspective on the medium or storytelling in general?
That's a great question. I'd have to say, Death of Superman, and I know we're kind of sticking on Superman here, but, Death of Superman was at a pretty important time in my life. I think I was about 14, 15 when that occurred. And I was really shocked, but sort of really interested to know what they were going to do next, right? Like, so he has this storyline, like, is it true he's going to die? And sort of it actually happens and it occurs, and then it's like, okay, what is happening next? And I was really surprised that they would actually make a move like that, where they would take this established character and sort of kill them off, even if it was for just a temporary time. And so that was my introduction into how they can have major sea changes in these dramatic storylines, and they sort of recall them back, or they just reset the universe or whatever they do, right? But at the time, that sort of really rocked the sense of stability that I had with comics and with those characters, and I was it was really interesting to go through that process and sort of almost quasi grieve for Superman, but then sort of still be wondering, like, well, what's going to happen next? Like, what are they doing now? Like, what's and that anticipation, right? So that was probably a pretty telling point in my life when that occurred.
Oops. Oh, yeah, I could see that. I mean, it's pretty ballsy to start a comic with the death of Superman, and it's like, well, dang, now I know I'm going to be emotionally scarred.
Yeah, exactly. And of course, these days there's I mean, even back in the day, they were, killing off characters, bringing them back, or, they weren't dead in the first place. They were in a pocket universe. They were so on and so forth. But I mean, very interesting how they're handling some of these stories. Like, for a certain period of time, no X-Men could die. They were quite immortal for a while, or they could be resurrected, that kind of thing at any point. And so they play around with it in different ways. It makes storytelling interesting, and it makes for different stories. But yeah, I think it's a pretty common trope these days. But it was kind of shocking to me when that happened back in the day.
I could see it being very surprising then. Now they do it often. Like, I think one of the most recent ones was the death of Miss Marvel that they teased like months in advance, and you're like, what? Okay, great.
Yeah. Yeah, it lends to sort of the bigger question about, comics in general, like, regarding tentpole storytelling, as I like to call it, right? Like, so are they building to something, and then there's the after effects of that? Well, then what's next? Okay, now we're building to something else. So we're building to this, we're building to that, and that was less of a thing back in the 70s and the 80s. The 80s really sort of started kicking this off with Crisis, the many Crisis events, or the many the Secret Wars in Marvel, that kind of thing, where they had these tentpole events, major swings in the entire universe. They seem to be doing that much more often these days, right? And so it gets very addictive, because instead of creating storylines that are sort of not visually, like, storytelling wise, they're flat. They're good stories, but they just continue and continue. There's these tentpole effects where they want to build and they want to create this massive world changing event. Well, you can't do that every other year, because it gets tiresome after a while, right? So yeah, there's a general sense of what kind of storytelling they should be doing. Should they be going for those big tentpole events, or should they actually be trying to just build out good stories on a continual basis?
Well, I do think with some comic franchises, they've got the right idea with using the multiverse, because then those big events affect one universe, and if they don't like it, they're like, it happened over there anyways. Just don't worry about it.
It's gone now. They're gone, or they're fine, or you can ignore it, or they're never coming back until 5 years from now. That kind of thing. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, just for the surprise factor in 5 years.
Exactly.
So, is there a comic book art or storyline that you think is the best ever written?
Oh, wow. Best ever written.
It's a big question.
That is a big question. I think that's a very subjective question. Is the best ever written? But I'll tell you some of my favorites. Because,
what you think is the best ever for your tastes.
Yeah. I definitely love Craven's Last Hunt with Spider-Man, and that whole period of what they were doing with Marvel, what they were doing with the Spider-Man character at that time. So Craven's Last Hunt is essentially what it appears to be is that Kraven actually kills Spider-Man and becomes Spider-Man, right? So becomes Spider-Man, becomes obviously a more vicious, more terrifying Spider-Man than Peter Parker was. And we learn later on that he wasn't dead. He was heavily tranquilized and buried for a period of time, comes back from the dead, and vanishes Kraven. And I just like that entire storyline. So the cover art had, Spider-Man coming out of his grave, and next to like the headstone for Gwen Stacy and all that kind of stuff. I think that was just really, really eloquently done. Really sort of terrifying story of apparent death and resurrection, and you had Kraven like eating spiders and just being like it was just a great sort of macabre type storyline, and I thought that's absolutely one of my favorites. What else? The Right Hand of Doom, which is another a Hellboy story, which is quintessentially the basis for the first Hellboy movie. which has his origins, where he came from, and has his life turned upside down, and discovers what his actual purpose is to be the right hand of doom and bring about the apocalypse. And how do you stop that? How do you defeat your purpose? Is it fate, or is it destiny, or not? That kind of storyline. And of course, with Mike Mignola's art and artistry, I thought it was beautiful. So yeah, those are two that come to mind right off the top of my head.
Craven's Last Hunt, I really, really enjoyed. I love the character Craven. I love him for Spider-Man, and it is a very popular arc as of right now because of Craven the Hunter, and everyone is reading that comic thinking this is nothing like the movie.
Yeah, well, I didn't catch the movie just yet. I know you saw it and you had your review about it. How did that? I didn't see your review. What's your general sense? I'm turning the tables and I'm asking you a question. What's your general?
It was a Sony movie. It happened. I gave it a 5. I did have fun with the movie, but it was just Sony didn't have to do all that.
Yeah.
It didn't feel like a Craven movie. It felt more like a family squabble movie between Craven and his family.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, I'll definitely be checking out. I know it's going to end up on streaming fairly soon. But,
just like the Joker 2, which was like the next week.
Yeah. And Madam Web, I know that as well. So
that was easily the worst one for me. I'm still pissed about that.
It's curious, Sony could take that property and they said, hey, we're going to expand on it and we're going to make standalone bad guy movies, and then just sort of really half-ass it, and when they didn't actually need to. Like it's astonishing to me that they put that little effort in trying to make good films, like Morbius and all those other ones as well.
Yeah.
I am partial to the Venom movies. I haven't seen the third one yet, but I am partial to the Venom movies. I do like that character, as I can tell. I guess you do as well. And so, I haven't seen it yet, but I did like the first one. Second one was okay, but yeah, I do like a good Venom every now and again.
I liked the first Venom, and that's when I was like, okay, maybe we're okay. And then they just kept going and going, and it was just, why? It's like you said, they don't put any care into it, to the point that in Madam Web, the antagonist's mouth doesn't even sync up with the words. Like, I feel like that's an easy fix. You just kind of push it over to the right,
Yeah, I heard that. I heard that there was like a dubbing issue or whatever it is. It's wild. And I also heard, spoilers for anyone who hasn't seen the movie, by the way, but I also heard like our three characters, the spider women we see don't really get into full costume and aren't really doing anything. It's only in future visions they're using.
It's like one vision. If you've seen the trailer, you've seen them in their costumes, and that's all you get.
Yeah.
I was so pissed. I love those characters, and those evil bastards went and did that. Oh, I'm so mad. And the thing that I think they screwed up the most, and where they just stopped caring, is when they made these villains into heroes. Because it's like, where is that going to lead? If they're heroes, they're not going to fight Spider-Man. They're not going to become a Sinister Squad, Sinister anything. They're just gonna be doing their thing.
Yeah. So they kind of took, so it's like the anti-hero sort of, template, and they sort of said, okay, we'll make our guy a reluctant hero, or they do the good thing in their own way, and they don't really care about it. But then, what do you do with that after? Like, is there like a team up, or is there and you can actually fight a good guy, and you've built up some credence with the audience, right? And then you're going to lose it all by actually fighting, Tom Holland Spider-Man or whatever. But it's very very odd to me. And Yeah, I have no idea what they were expecting to where they were expecting to go with those characters in the first place.
Yeah, especially since they said that Madam Web wasn't even in the same universe. That makes no sense whatsoever. I don't know what universe you're referring to, but it's sucked in that universe too.
Yeah, yeah, I don't know either.
It's I don't understand it. It's just I could go on for hours about that. I'm still so mad. But like Craven, I will say was not the worst one for me. I
Mm-hmm.
really like Aaron Taylor Johnson as Craven. But just not in this movie.
That's too bad. That's
Yeah.
too bad because that guy has charisma
Yeah.
uh, and is a good actor, and really want to see him succeed. But this one just didn't look like it. And I heard the fight. There was some pretty decent fight sequences. I
Yeah.
heard. So yeah, I'll be checking it out. But kind of like sitting back, like I am right now, with my arms crossed, kind of watching it instead of sitting forward and enjoying it. I think today is 3 years since No Way Home was released.
Mhm. Yeah.
So now that movie, I was like sitting forward and like highly anticipating, right? And
Mhm.
thinking like, this is how you handle a group of really nasty guys. Give it a slightly lighter tone, right? It wasn't as dark as maybe their individual movies were, the original Sony films were, but like these are bad guys and they're trying to either redeem themselves or whatever it is. But in the end, they still get to fight. Fight the Spider-Man men,
Yeah, it's hard to
and
say.
yeah, and it worked really well. So I love that.
I agree. That movie was a ton of fan service, but fan service is my love language, so who am I to argue with them?
Exactly. Why not? Why not?
Yeah. So, is there a writer or an artist that has had a huge influence on you?
Uh, well, I have my some artists that I really love, like Sal Buscema and Todd McFarlane, Mike Mignola, as I mentioned previously. Uh, Writers such as Denny O'Neil. So Denny O'Neil is a writer from the 60s to the 90s, basically, and he has had such an influence on both DC and Marvel that you'd be surprised if he didn't touch something that you loved, if you loved comics at all, right?
Yeah.
So I definitely think, as a writer and editor, he definitely had the most impact because my era was sort of the modern era, which is like the 70s to the 90s, right? When I was younger and collecting comics, I still do collect comics, but I think that was the peak period for me. That was like the most influential. And when Todd inked that Spider-Man and gave him a really fresh new look and feel. He really made Spider-Man very kinetic feeling. He like Spider-Man now moved very differently. That whole universe was really, really interesting to look at. And then when he left Marvel and went on to create Spawn, um, I thought that was brilliant as well, and I loved it as well. So Todd definitely, just in the way his mind works and how he draws was really really life changing for me. I'm in no way an artist, but I was actually really inspired to take his drawings and sort of replicate them as best I could and sort of just start to try to learn how to draw and stuff like that. And Todd's work definitely was the main reason why I did that because I just loved it so much, and that was the way I could enjoy it and study it more.
Oh, wow. That's so nice. Those are solid answers, I'd say.
Thank you.
So, how do you feel about the evolution of comics over the years? Have you seen any significant changes in themes or art styles?
Yeah, art styles definitely. So, I mean, you could see that evolution. It's funny because when I do deep dive, I'm one day I'm working on something from the '90s, one day I'm working on something from the '70s, and back and forth. And so you can really start to see that evolution of the art styles, the usage of tools. So, in the '90s when computer animation started, how vastly different it is from computer animation that is done now, right?
Mm-hmm.
Moving away from the inking and penciling of the older artists from the '80s earlier, and even the evolution of font design, of the bubbles, the
Yeah.
thought bubbles, talking bubbles, those kind of things have
Mm-hmm.
really sort of shifted, and sort of how they've improved upon things, but actually changed as they were doing so. So, case in point, I was covering a '90s comic, and Wolverine from 1996, I believe, and a lot of that computer work was being done. A lot of that sort of shading, I guess you would call it, right? And computer programs at the time were just not as capable as they are now to incorporate that hand drawn feel, to incorporate true shading as it's done by a hand artist. And so the animations come out very manga type, and I'm not shitting on manga, but I'm just saying it very like manga looking. The art comes across kind of flat for a small period of time, and so to me that's really really interesting to see that evolution, because everything was moving towards that computer, using computers to draw. And so some people said the art was lessened at that time in the '90s for those that were drawing strictly on computers. Nowadays, almost everybody draws on computers. It's actually pretty much the norm. It's the opposite if you're not.
Yeah.
And but the quality of that computer work is so much better now, and it feels very much like hand drawn art. So yeah, I can see that evolution, and get appreciation for it, and sort of be able to look at a comic, a panel, a page, whatever it is, and almost be able to say, oh, that looks like it's from the '70s, or that looks like it's from the '80s or the '90s. So yeah, it has definitely changed, and tracking that stuff is really really fun.
I I can see that. I think it's changed just as well as the storylines or the characters. It's very modernized, very
Mm-hmm.
brightly colored, very quick.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the way they tell stories absolutely has changed, right? And that's just like um, the culture feeding on itself, but not. It's not. That sounds negative, but it's not. You have artists now who had grown up in the '90s, right, and early 2000s, and so they are showcasing their art in the way that they were brought up with, that with the art that they were brought up with, right? So it just kind of feeds upon itself, and so that's what that evolution is. And then the same thing happens in music, in film, in literature, those kind of things, where the culture just is. New generations come in, they bring in their new and different ways of seeing things, because they were impacted by the culture from their younger years, and so on and so forth. So I think it's definitely changing the way stories are told, how quick they are, and are we talking more speech bubbles, less speech bubbles, more exposition, less exposition? Entire pages that it's just one key piece of art versus rows of 9 perfect rows of boxes, or 9 boxes rather, and 3 perfect rows, telling a story, right? And how that's changed is fascinating to see.
I agree. That it's a lot of there's like really really big changes you do notice, and then there's the tiny ones. That's like, oh, have the speech bubbles gotten bigger? Have the sentences gotten longer?
Yeah,
Are there not as many flips throughout the comics?
absolutely, absolutely.
So, in your opinion, what makes a comic book stand out compared to other forms of storytelling like novels or movies?
It's a really good question.
Thank you.
The the comic book is almost like a miniature slice of time, that you're given to control at your own pace because you are the reader. You are omnipresent. You get to see the thoughts, read the thoughts rather, read the speeches, get the exposition, get some context, right? Oh, that, the editor's notes, this happened in the previous issue. And so you're dropping in on that really short period of time where something definitely epic is happening. Comic books are nothing but exciting, right? I mean, I wouldn't read a boring comic book about nothing if nothing happens. So you're given that small slice of time, and what's exciting is that it's almost always left off in a cliffhanger, right? So what's going to happen next time, right? What's going to occur? Some major crisis is averted, but then there's a new crisis around the corner, and you're the only one who sees that guy in the corner watching our heroes walk off. So who's that? What's going to happen? Where is it going to go from here? That kind of thing. And I think, comic book movies borrow heavily on this, of course. Those are 2-hour-long epics that are not necessarily stories. They are movies. So we don't necessarily get all the context. We don't get the thought processes. It's told in a different medium, of course. Books are longer form. Books are little to no art form. So it's kind of this unique picture storytelling that we're able to share with each other. And it's almost like telling a story across a campfire back in the day, where it's a short story, something you can digest very easily. And I think comics are a follow-up to that kind of storytelling, where it's not quite full cerebral in the head because there's lots of visuals, but it's also not like watching a movie because it doesn't happen right in front of you and you're just passive, right? You are the one reading those comic books. You are the one building out that motion that is shown to you in a static format, but you're the one building out that motion. You're the one filling in those thoughts, filling in those voices, and all the action. So it's a very unique experience.
I love how you answered that, because when I came up with the question, I was like, I don't know how to answer that. Hopefully he has a good one, because I might just steal that answer.
Go for it. You could take it.
It was very, very well said. I really loved everything you said.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
So for my last question, where can our listeners find you?
You can find me on YouTube at Read the Freaking Comics. It is my love letter to comics, and it is where I share tons of short stories, but also longer form, once every couple of weeks, a 10-minute dive that you can listen to in your car, whatever it is, and enjoy sort of a deep dive into specific issues. I'm also doing a ton of podcasts, ton of radio shows. You can listen to me monthly at the moment at Comic Friendly, and I'll get the address for you so you can share it, where they can hear me answer trivia questions, basically answer user questions about comics. And you can hear me on your podcast the next time you invite me, because I would love to be back.
I would love to have you back. This is so much fun.
Thank you.
So if you're watching or listening to this episode, just look in the show notes and you will see all the links to where you can find Michael and all his information on all the comics that we've all grown up with. As a watcher of his videos myself, I have to say I highly recommend. Okay, so thank you for stopping by. You are amazing. I cannot wait to have you back. You have to come back, because I need to know an update on your wife and comics.
Okay, I'll let you know. Invite me anytime. I'll be happy to be here.
Perfect. So, to our listeners, thank you for listening to another episode of Vigilante Vibes, the first non-toxic Marvel podcast. Check me out on all social networks just by searching Vigilante Vibes Podcast. You can catch all my comic book, TV show, and movie reviews on nerdinitiative.com. Wherever you're listening to this episode, click that subscribe button so you don't miss anything else. Thanks for listening, and have a marvelous night.